You are watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. It's time to see what's making the headlines with the editor-in-chief of the National World Cities newspaper group, Nancy Fielder, and the barrister and former government minister, Anna Soubry. So let's see what's on some of those front pages for you now. Well, the Metro has the headline, "Stabbed in their pushchairs," referencing the attack on 4 young children at a park in France. The Sun reports that one of the victims is a 3-year-old British girl. That's also the main story for The Express. The Daily Mirror focuses on a woman who leapt into the path of the attacker to try to stop them. The Telegraph leads on Ukraine, saying the long-awaited counter-offensive has begun. The Eye describes Britain and the US as rewriting the special relationship with the newly agreed Atlantic Declaration. But The Guardian points out that Rishi Sunak didn't get the free trade deal the government wanted. The Mail asks whether NHS patients have the right to know if the doctors treating them are transgender. The FT reports that the Financial Conduct Authority is to expand its investigation into claims of sexual assault at the hedge fund Odey Asset Management. Its founder, Crispin Odey, denies the claims. And a reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you watch us. And we are joined tonight by Nancy Fielder and Anna Soubry. Welcome to you both. We start with this shocking story, front page of the Metro, the stabbing of the children and 2 adults in France. Atrocious. Nancy?
Yeah, it's hard to find words, isn't it, when stories are just this awful. I mean, the footage you've shown, every single image, it's a man who calmly walks around with a huge knife in his hand and deliberately targets babies. They're babies, aren't they? Some of them presumably could barely walk. They were in pushchairs and they've got serious injuries. They're fighting for their lives now. And I just think how horrific it must have been for everybody involved. You can kind of see there's one with a pushchair. And what could you do? There is nowhere to go. How do you even defend a baby against things like that? You shouldn't even have to think about it. And it's such a beautiful place, such a picturesque background. And I think it's rare that we come across, I mean, there's a lot of bad news, isn't there, out there, but this is absolutely horrific. A knife man who deliberately targets babies when they're in a playground with no defence.
Yes, I mean, it's just truly shocking. And we saw one woman was seen on video desperately trying to protect her child, Anna.
Exactly. And, you take your children to a playground to have fun and you think you're going to be safe. And as Nancy says, Annecy, which some of your viewers may know it's on the route for people when they're going on holiday in France, either if they're lucky enough to go skiing or in the summer or other times. It's a beautiful place. And to think of something as horrific as this happening, especially in a playground when you're on holiday, absolutely dreadful. And we can only have our thoughts and prayers with the families of those little ones in particular and hope that they are not going to be too seriously injured and they'll all pull through and be all right. Yes,
so there definitely will be in our prayers. And the Sun pointing to the fact that one of the children is actually a British girl that was on holiday at the time, Nancy.
Yeah, I mean, presumably they've got very young children. You can go on holiday out of school holidays, can't you? They've gone somewhere for peace and quiet. You just never think that something like this is going to happen. And it must be just as horrendous for the families back home trying to work out what is going on when you've got a young child, a grandchild over there in this situation. I mean, I think we can all picture it, can't we? We can all sort of start to put yourself in that situation and you just don't know what could you possibly do. There are a few things as horrific as this and it must be awful for everybody back home as well as, I mean, the whole area must be absolutely shaken in France.
Yes, we spoke earlier to our correspondent who's there for us and she was saying that, well, certainly at the moment, the police are not saying that it's terrorism related. They're not seeing that as a motive at the moment, Anna.
Yeah. Look, this man apparently is a Syrian refugee being granted asylum in, I think, in Sweden. in any event, he was in France. He's apparently a Christian. None of these things I personally think are particularly relevant. But unfortunately, whenever we have attacks like this, which seem to have absolutely no logic, no motive whatsoever, what on earth possesses anybody unless they're profoundly mentally disturbed to do such a heinous thing, or we assume, or we certainly explore that perhaps it's linked to terrorism. We're told in this case it's not. Yes,
we shall see. Obviously, it's a developing story and police still carrying out investigations. Let's move on to politics, international politics, Nancy. And Britain and the US rewrite the special relationship. These details coming out of the news conference that Rishi Sunak held with Joe Biden in the States this evening.
Yes, so there are big smiles, big handshakes. How much has actually been rewritten? Who knows? But both of them are very, very clear that it's a special relationship, that they've got really good deals here. But actually, if you pick through the detail, it's fairly scant. It's certainly not the incredible life-changing deal for the country that was talked about way before the Brexit vote. It's a series of, I think one of the papers described them sort of mini deals. And it's good. It's a positive step forward. But I think we could possibly make too much of this. The most powerful thing, I think, is them sat together. There's the handshake, there's the smiles. And fortunately, Biden says he still likes us and we've still got a relationship like no other.
Anna, what are your thoughts on the Atlantic Declaration?
Well, it is, as we've heard, it looks like it's I don't think it's even mini deals. I think it's just agreements that will work on things like AI. And a lot of the thinking behind this is that we can cut China out of the supply chains. I don't have any problem with that because of our over-reliance. There's a really strong case that we are overly reliant on China. And we all know the difficulties with China, and there's also a view that we're also beginning to reduce the importance of Russia when it comes to trade. So anything that strengthens our relationship with our friends in America, to me, is a good thing. But my real takeaway, as Nancy was saying, is to do with Brexit. I mean, we were promised that we would get this amazing deal with America. We were told, in fact, the Conservatives put it in the 2019 manifesto that we were going to get that deal. And I think that the awful Donald Trump said that was possible. And those of us that were opposed to Brexit said this is a load of old nonsense. This is just not going to happen. You're basically being lied to and conned to. You don't get trade deals with a country like America like that, as we were promised. And I have to say, we've been proved right. And yet again, we see a promise that was made about the benefits of Brexit being badly broken. But at least this is a good thing. And I think it's a good thing for our country. And it would be even better if we picked up some of the policies that Biden has about having a strategy that on our industrial strategy or a business strategy that is looking at how we can really get growth from some of these green technologies.
And Nancy, that's the point that the Guardian's making, that exact point that Sunak didn't get the trade deal that he wanted, and as Anna says, that was promised in the manifesto.
Yeah, and I mean, they put it across as a very negative thing, don't they? A pact with Biden as hope of trade deal vanishes. It is a great example of how different stories can be spun depending on your political inclination as a newspaper editor. But yes, I mean, the deal is not big, but it is a deal. And it's positive. I mean, there are all sorts of jokes that actually the sort of most senior people in America can't even remember our Prime Minister's name because he's sort of not in their faces, he's not there enough, which is a concern. But there he is. We've got the image, we've got positive steps forward. And it would be fantastic, actually, if Biden's serious that we should be leading the way in sort of supporting economics around climate change and what we can do to sort of anti-fossil fuel technology. That would be fantastic. I don't see much of it happening, but I would love it to happen. So that could be a really positive thing.
When questioned about the lack of a wider deal, Sunak insisted the declaration would benefit British companies and respond to the particular opportunities and challenges that we faced right now and into the future. Let's take a look before the break at the Telegraph. And the Kyiv counteroffensive has begun, we read. Anna.
Yes, and let us hope that this is the beginning of a huge push now by Ukraine to regain their land following the appalling and unlawful invasion by Russia. And we know that Russia has continued to commit the most appalling war crimes by, it looks like, the logic tells us that they must be responsible for the blowing up of the dam and the appalling flooding that we are seeing. And here now is the wonderful Zelensky in Kherson. Forgive me if I pronounced that incorrectly. And the emerging story, of course, is what the Russians are now doing, having breached the dam, caused this terrible flooding. It seems that they're now actually terrorising, bombing people fleeing from the floods. But what the Telegraph is saying, and it's there, splashed on their front page, is that this long-awaited, and we hope it to be final offensive, has at last begun. And I think all of us would wish the Ukrainians every success, and we must continue to do everything we can to support them. A lot of their weaponry has quite properly been supplied to them by countries like ours, and we should all be really pleased about that and congratulate the government for what it's done.
Let's take a look at the Metro. We're going to go inside the Metro, and this story about NHS waiting lists, the waiting list for routine NHS hospital treatment, including knee and hip operations, has hit a record 7.4 million in England. This comes months after Rishi Sunak vowed to cut that list. Anna.
Yes. I was reading this story in detail because it's not just the fact that the waiting lists, as the headline says there, 7.4 million people waiting for an op, with this promise from Rishi Sunak really now under real pressure as to whether or not he's going to be able to deliver on that. When you actually dig right into that story, there's a number of things that struck me. Now, we know from the reports today that cancer waiting times have risen to a situation which is completely unacceptable. But the other thing that struck me about this story in the Metro is that we've had the busiest time ever for May in accident and emergency. Now, we know that there are huge winter pressures on the NHS, but to have a record busiest time in May is quite extraordinary. That really needs a deep dive into it to work out what on earth is going on. Now, one of the factors when it comes to that waiting list must be the action by doctors and also by nurses and the strike action, which we're all familiar with. But in any event, these are statistics that will really cause the government real concern. And of course, ordinary people who are desperate to have those operations, want those cancer treatments, need that speed, especially in things like cancer, but also want to know what's going on in A&E and why there are record levels for May of people going into A&E.
Nancy, and Minesh Patel of Macmillan Cancer Support is quoted as saying a system that cannot cope is letting down thousands. It's vital government prioritises cancer care.
Yes, and I think we've all got friends or family who are suffering from this, who simply aren't getting the treatment they need, and actually many who have died or are dying because they weren't diagnosed quickly enough, or they weren't treated enough, or their treatments didn't move along quickly enough. This is a really enormous problem, and it is a political problem. It needs a political solution. It needs the people who work in our NHS to be treated correctly, to be paid properly, to be respected, to be encouraged into the job, because let's be honest, not many people want to do these jobs anymore for obvious reasons. It needs a complete change of approach. But actually, the least interesting thing for the vast majority of people is the fact that the Prime Minister's failing on his targets. Because actually, if you're waiting, one of the 7.4 million people waiting for an operation, all you care about is that you need it done, and you need it done quickly. And it's a political football that should never have been allowed to become a political football. It's far too important. The NHS is the thing that people value most about this country. Every single survey seems to come back and say how much we love our NHS. And yet here it is being let down, and there's 7.4 million people desperately needing treatment and not getting it.
Anna, take us to The Guardian and the picture there of the smoky haze. This is from the wildfires raging in Canada, and at some points during the day you could hardly see the sky scene because of the depth of the fog.
It's extraordinary. And this isn't something that's just today. This has been going on for a number of days and is not likely to shift for a number of days. And there have been these appalling wildfires, and this is the consequence. And of course, it's not just New York. I mean, there are pictures, obviously, of other places, other cities like Washington. So look at the scale of this. And I think the thing that's really concerning people, even more than the fact that it has produced these extraordinary levels of pollution, as we can see in photographs from New York, Washington, and other places. But it's the fact that those wildfires have come earlier than they would otherwise have done. And then that adds to this real, there's just no debate about it. We're basically destroying our planet. What more evidence do people want? And we can talk about it till the cows come home. But actually there is no debate again in my mind that we have got to start proper serious action now.
Indeed. Anna and Nancy, thank you both.